So, industrialization and revolutions going on, what do these mean? If you want a shorthand definition of what the Industrial Revolution is, or what that term industrialization means, I would say it's this. It's the shift from everything being made by human and animal power, a push or a pull from a human or an animal, maybe wind or water occasionally, to that of machines and fossil fuels. That's what industrialization is. It's a gradual, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's kind of slower, but it's a shift in human history where we see the rise of mechanization, machines, and fossil fuels, and that is our primary means of producing material goods. It's a big transition. It's one that it's almost hard at this point in history to get our minds around how it was beforehand. What I want to do here is I want to give you an image of how that came about, how the modern world, as we understand it, of industry comes about. Okay. So, to kind of visit this, I want to take us back to agriculture, because the story of industrialization is really rooted in this idea of changes within agriculture, particularly in one place, particularly in Great Britain. Great Britain is the first nation to kind of industrialize as we would define it. And I'm going to provide you the basis for that, the reasons, the foundations for why it happens in Britain. One thing I would point out is we know this already, the Black Death, the death of a large number of people, a third to a quarter of the European population, it really destroys the labor force and it creates a need, it stimulates innovations and changes within farming. It means you have to do more farming with less people, so you're going to turn to maybe technology to help you increase your productivity. Additionally, Great Britain is seeing a number of changes in its agriculture system. One of these changes is commonly known as the enclosure movement. Broadly speaking, it's the consolidation, it's the bunching together, it's the merging of many small farms in England. In many cases, this was common land, land that was owned by everybody. We'll talk more about what that means in this film clip. Into bigger and bigger farms that, on one hand, were more productive. No longer is agriculture dispersed amongst a lot of small peasant farmers, but it's brought together. Think back to the medieval manor and how self-contained and self-sufficient that was. That kind of gets broken down by this enclosure movement. Larger farms, land getting bought up and encompassed into one more efficient operation. So let's investigate that enclosure movement with this. Enclosure movement has kind of pros and cons. On one hand, the land is being more efficiently used. Wealthy people can buy it up and fence it off and use it for more productive means rather than a bunch of small-scale peasant farmers. But what this means is that the population, which is recovering after the Black Death and is growing, that means there's going to be a labor surplus. Lots of people who simply don't have work anymore, that can no longer be employed in the countryside as farmers. And in England, this means people are going to be going to the cities, or maybe some of them are going to go to the colonies. This is something you talk about in US 1, the European settlement of the Americas. That's going to be an outlet, a safety valve for surplus population. If you can't make it in England, maybe you can go to the colonies as an indentured servant or something else. You see the rise of the first poor laws. Some of you were coming up on, the holiday season. One of the common stories of the holiday season is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. There's a line in Dickens' A Christmas Carol where Ebenezer Scrooge is approached by the people collecting charity early on. And does anybody remember what he says to the charity collectors? Okay. Or at least you don't want to share. He basically says, no, I don't have money for charity. And he says it in a sarcastic way. He says, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Workhouses were something that was created during this time to deal with the influx of labor from the countryside. Poor people that could no longer work in the countryside were showing up in the cities, and they didn't have anything to do. And that's kind of the backdrop to the story A Christmas Carol, if you're familiar with it. So why Great Britain? Why is this happening in Britain? When we go to the Chromebooks in a bit, I want you to come back to this, so pay particular attention. Geography. There's some natural advantages Britain has just because of its physical layout. It's an island nation, and there are many inland rivers. Inland rivers may not sound like a big deal today, But back then, if you had lots of rivers, it means you could capture potential energy from the flowing of water. You could put a water wheel and a mill on these rivers or streams and capture that for the sawing of boards, for the grinding of wheat and later on corn and other things, and it makes basically energy more available to the public, energy that we would otherwise use today through electricity. Coal and iron deposits, if you dig into the sides of the mountains in places like Wales and central England and north towards Scotland, you find large coal deposits and iron ore. That's not important to someone living as a peasant in the 1400s, but once you can start to run trains and steam engines on coal and build things out of metal, that's going to be a big deal. They have many deep harbors. Think of all of those port cities, like, for instance, London or Plymouth or Southampton or Liverpool or Glasgow, Scotland. All of those are port cities that Great Britain has historically built around and been able to ship goods great distances. They were a hub for shipbuilding. They had this labor force that was experienced in the manufacturing of ships. That's going to be big if you're going to try to project and send goods throughout the world. They're the hub for the wool industry. Wool may not sound that exciting, but back then it was the basis kind of for most clothes, particularly clothes that would be shipped throughout the continent to stay warm in winter season. England was a big producer of that through chic. They have political stability. Great Britain really prides itself on having, yes, a king, but also a parliament that it shares power with, the monarchy, that is, that shares power with. And that's going to allow for Britain to really thrive, that they're not constantly having to fight wars. In Europe, not the same level of political stability. You have Spain, you have France, you have the Holy Roman Empire. There are wars of religion. It seems like there's a violent war every 15 minutes. England has its fair share of civil war and conflict, but it's nowhere near as bad as Europe. A reliable banking system. This may sound not all that significant, but when it comes to laying the building blocks of industrialization, to be the first to industrialize, England has what's called the Bank of England. They created it in the late 1600s. What this means is if you're a wealthy person who has a pile of money or has regular income and you need a safe place to park it, the Bank of England, a central bank, is a really good thing for you. It means you can not only park your money there and it's safe, but it means you can earn a return on your investment. They're going to sell kind of the beginnings of savings bonds or treasury notes, which means you can get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% back over a period of time. You're not going to get that in the private sector. Bank of England makes it possible. Encouragement of industry and trade. They'll invest in early manufacturing companies. They'll pass laws that make it only permissible for British goods to be sold within the colonies, which kind of nurtures and builds up their industry. They're going to have a powerful army and particularly a navy as well. So if you have to fight a war, they're able to kind of back up their commercial interests. You're more likely to invest if you think there's a military backing you up. What are some other British advantages? They're an island nation, so naturally they have protection from wars in Europe. The King of France can't just say, I don't like England, I'm going to invade. Can't do that. It's a much more complicated operation. The King of France can invade Spain, can invade the Holy Roman Empire, but since England is an island, can't exactly get an army over that easy. Joint stock companies, perhaps a term you remember from US 1. A joint stock company, it's kind of the nucleus, the beginnings of our modern stock market. This is important because with a joint stock company, no one single person has the risk of the investment. It's not like a sole proprietorship where this one person owns everything and if it fails, they fail. With a joint stock company, you disperse the investment throughout many people, what we call shareholders. That means if you own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 30, 50 shares of stock, you have an interest in it succeeding, but you're not going to be financially wiped out if that business fails. You may remember some of these early joint stock companies, like the Virginia Company or the East India Company. All of these are early examples of that. They kind of are little early proto-capitalist entities that can go out and attract investors. The advent of insurance. This may sound like the most uninteresting, insignificant thing, but insurance, in a way, is extremely important to laying the foundations for industry. Here's why. Kind of similar to a joint stock company. If you have insurance, you're less likely to do what? Some of you guys are at the stage in life where you're buying maybe your first car insurance or liability insurance. It means you're less likely to have to worry if a catastrophic event happens. It means that something bad like a ship coming from the New World loaded down with cargo, whether it's cotton, sugar, or something other valuable that you have a stake in, if you buy insurance on that, it means that ship can sink and you're not financially wiped out, just like the joint stock company. It allows you to disperse risk amongst many people. Britain has colonies, both in North America, which we all know about, but they have colonies elsewhere in the East Indies, the West Indies, the sugar trade, the spice trade. Later on, they're going to have a really successful colony in Asia, in India in particular. And they're going to get wide varieties of different types of goods. Coffee, sugar, tobacco. These are just to name a few. The picture you see to the right here, this is an English coffee house. How many of you have been to Starbucks before? Okay, yeah, like pretty much everybody. That idea of a coffee house, a hub where you go, you not only drink coffee, but it's a place for learning, thinking. Starbucks kind of prides itself on having like books and newspapers laying out. It's a place for conversation. That's a British invention. It's kind of the sign of this early industrial commercial revolution going on, where business people would gather and discuss their investments and ideas. It's going to lay that foundation. I want to just share with you this short excerpt. Please, by all means, do not copy this down. But it's an excerpt from a man who's writing during this time period. He's a big fan of the British government and the British Empire. That will be pretty clear to you. He's a political writer in the time. His name is Henry Kerr. He writes a book called English Liberties, or The Freeborn Subject's Inheritance. Great, catchy, snappy title. Was Britain different? Is there something special about Britain? I went through all of those tangible, material, geographical, unique things about Britain, but consider what Henry Kerr writes here. The constitution of our English government is the best in the world. It is no arbitrary tyranny, meaning no ordinary tyranny of some strong person in charge, like the Turkish Grand Signior or the French kings, little jab at the French king there, or the wills or lusts rather, who wills or lusts rather depose of lies, fortune, or unhappy subjects, meaning the French king can arrest people at will, can rule at will. Remember, they're an absolute monarch. Not in Britain. Nor an oligarchy, the control of a handful of powerful men, where great men like the fish of the ocean prey upon and devour the lesser at their pleasure. Nor ye a democracy. Democracy is not a happy term in this time period. It's not something you'd celebrate or say in a complimentary way. Or a popular state, much less an anarchy. So we're not an anarchy either. We're all confusedly hail fellows, well met, but most excellently mixed or qualified monarchy, where the king is vested with large prerogatives or responsibilities, or the ability to act, sufficient to support majesty and restrained only from power of doing himself and his people harm. In Britain, we have the best of all system, Henry Kerr is saying. In Britain, the king is powerful enough to get things done, but also shares power with a parliament that restrains him from doing bad or cruel things. All those areas in bold, that's not how you want to do it. But in Britain, that's something unique. That's something special, Henry Kerr would say. We're going to come back to this in a second. Actually, no. Open your Chromebooks. And I'd like you to go to this URL. Go to pollev.com/my name, John Kozlovich, only there's no C at the end. JOHNKOZLOVIC, and then 048. And you should see this poll. Question. Okay. Based on what you know about pre-industrial Britain, and the Kerr excerpt, that may give you some context to the letter from that guy, the guy who writes that love letter about how Great Britain is so awesome. Compose a brief tweet on why Britain, was poised to industrialize in the coming. You kind of got the idea of how Britain is set up, ready to industrialize. One other big idea that is the total backdrop to this, that nothing else can really come together unless this is in place, and that is this idea of capitalism. And we're going to revisit this on Thursday a little bit. But there are three to four kind of big ideas that underpin the idea of capitalism. If I had to have a top 5 list of isms that world history students should know by the end, this would be on that top 5 list. Private property. Again, we don't even think about this so much today because private property is so reflexively part of our lives. But the idea behind it is that you own stuff, the government acknowledges you own it, and it will use the power of the law to defend it. But more importantly, capitalism is based on this idea that if you own something, you're going to be more likely to efficiently use it. You're going to treat it well. You're going to use it in ways that will benefit you. Additionally, profit motive. Profit motive is kind of the lifeblood of capitalism. It's what makes people act. It's the incentive to work hard and reap the rewards from your hard work, or your good ideas, or your diligence, or what have you. If you don't have that, it means if you own a business, it means you're going to be staying up late at night to make sure your books are balanced and that make sure your costs are contained, because if they're not, it means you're spending money needlessly. It means you're going to work extra hard to make that sale to that client, because that could mean the difference between your business succeeding or failing. That is a very powerful thing. Adam Smith's going to argue, he's going to call this motive kind of the invisible hand that makes people and goods and resources get to where they need to get. Another idea within capitalism is this idea of competition. And this maybe gets us into a moral gray area with capitalism, and we'll revisit this later, but the idea that competition is good because it leads to the best results. If you have the collision of ideas and products in the marketplace, and people running experiments, I think this is going to work, we're going to set it at this price, no, we're going to set it at this price, and all these little things colliding, that eventually you're going to get to the best, superior product out there. And it's going to be better for everyone. Finally, markets will drive innovation. This is a kind of belief in capitalism, that because we have markets, because people are pursuing the profit motive, that we're going to get the best stuff. It means Apple is going to be relentlessly working hard to come up with the next iPhone that has superior features to it, because it knows people are going to just have to have it. And that innovation is going to benefit everybody, because eventually the technology will be made available to everyone. I want to close with this quote here on capitalism. It really crystallizes it, brings it home quite a bit. It is not, this is from kind of the founder of modern capitalism, a Scottish economist named Adam Smith. He writes a famous book called The Wealth of Nations. In that book he writes, it is not from the benevolence. By benevolence I mean like the goodwill or charity gesture because it's the right thing to do. It is not, he says, the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from regard to their own self-interest. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because it's their business. The butcher who chops the meat to make the flank steak for your dinner, that is going to be their business. They're not doing it to make sure you have a nice dinner. The brewer who brews the beer or the baker who bakes the bread, they're all doing the same thing. They're trying to advance their own interests within the marketplace. So what does it mean to industrialize? Let me give you some concrete definition. I'll revisit that definition I started with. Industrialization is the gradual replacement of human and animal labor with mechanization, with machines. Machines, you could add on fossil fuels, all the things that create a modern society. You're no longer peasants on the land making things by hand and pulling things with animals. You now have machines to do that. Tractors, threshers, combines, powered by fossil fuels. That's where it ultimately leads. Cottage industries. This is kind of an early example of kind of the Industrial Revolution coming together before anybody kind of realized it. Cottage industries, it's small-scale production that's kind of the precursor to the modern factory, only there's no one factory where everybody comes together, punches a clock, and work. In the early going, particularly in England, you'd have people who would go out, companies that would go out and supply households with materials like cloth for making of clothes and patterns and maybe material for making shoes and other goods. And that late at night by candlelight, oftentimes women, but also children, would work on making these patterns, making these dresses, making these shirts, making these shoes, and then they'd get picked up again by that business, and then it'd be taken to the market. But it shows that that kind of was in place, that idea of the factory, that idea of production on a mass scale. If you had to look to one technology to emphasize industrialization, it would be this, the steam engine. Pretty simple device, and when you look at it, it's amazingly simple. You burn coal to heat water in a boiler to produce steam. You capture that steam in a cylinder, and you do that repeatedly, and that cylinder pumps back and forth like a piston that we'd recognize in an automobile. And it turns a wheel, and by transferring that energy from the steam piston to the flywheel, you can run any sort of mechanical operation. Incredibly simple, but it has profound consequences because you don't have to worry about spinning a water wheel attached to a river. You don't have to worry about feeding an animal so it can pull a cart. You can feed burning coal into this machine, and you have energy. So what are the applications of that steam engine? First one is water pumps. It's kind of amazing, but early coal mines, they were used just to get coal to burn for heat, but they figured out in these early mines they flooded with water, and you needed to have a pump to get that water out so you could make the mine more productive. Later on, they attach a steam engine to spinning looms, which allows you to kind of unlock that energy for the making of clothing. You get the emergence of the textile industry. Britain's going to take the lead in this, but it's quickly going to go to the Americas and other parts of the European continent as well. It's going to be kind of the first example of a factory job, working in a textile mill, making clothes. Steamboats. Doesn't take a lot of imagination to think once you have a steam engine, you can put it on a boat, and you can power it upriver against the current. These initially are going to be really dangerous. In fact, some of their boilers are going to explode, kill people, but with engineering, it gets better. Locomotives, the early trains, basically, steam locomotives, they're going to look really clunky and odd, and they're going to seem kind of inefficient, but when you compare it to the alternative, having an ox pull a wagon, a horse, wooden materials, this steam engine is going to mean you can move freight over land great distances reliably. And that's going to change the world. I would just draw a quick distinction here. Quickly, also weapons and warfare. Mrs. Clark's going to talk a bit about this in a second. But this is going to mean things like exploding artillery shells, guns, firearms, that if a metal piece breaks, you have a replacement part so you can fix it with, and you can put a soldier back into the field where they can be that much more destructive. I would just draw a quick distinction here between what we call the first and second industrial revolution. The first one is the one we just talked about. It's from about the 1750s to the 1850s. It focuses on coal, steam power, and iron making. The second industrial revolution you probably have some experience with in US too. It's the kind of one we talk about in the age of, or the Gilded Age, or the age of the robber barons, where you have rail, electrification, oil, Standard Oil, Carnegie Steel, some advancements in chemicals as well. To close here, big trends, things that I would take away from the industrialization experience, like how does it change the world? Here are some examples. Higher productivity, massively higher productivity. You can produce material goods on a scale that you just couldn't when you were limited by the finite amount of energy of human and animal power. Once you can unlock coal, steam, and rail power, later on electrification, you're going to create things with amazing ease. The need for less agricultural labor. I bring this up because, again, we think of ourselves as living through a time where we see the decline in factory labor. It's very much parallels with what they saw in the Industrial Revolution. The decline in farming labor, unskilled farming labor. It meant that people had to leave their farms and find other jobs in the cities. There's going to be a rise in factory labor. Workers are going to be less connected to their production, not nearly as much as, say, a peasant who plowed a field or tended animals. They had a relationship with what they created. If you work in a factory, you don't have that emotional connection to your product that you create. Wage labor. The idea that you show up, punch a clock, you work a wage 12 or 14 hours, and you get paid. And that you have to pay attention to the clock, because the clock tells you when your shift starts and when it ends. And it will also tell you when the trains arrive and when they leave. We become much more of a time-conscious society. Globalization. This has a lot of pros and cons. Pros, you get connected to the rest of the world. Cons, you begin to get in a situation where one group can exploit another group. where before they weren't connected. And finally, you're creating all this stuff. You're going to need to sell it. And sometimes you're not going to be able to sell it just to your own home, mother country population. You're going to have to go outward, across the sea, to far distant lands to find new markets with new groups of people. And by the way, when you get there, you might find that they have some stuff you're interested in, some new raw materials that you'd like to get your hands on. So industrialization kind of ticks off all of these new trends that change the course of the world. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Clark, who's going to link it up with this idea of colonialism.
Right. So, colonialism is going to be a big time period in European history. There's kind of also like different waves. There's a first wave in the 1400s, the Renaissance era, and then there's kind of this wave of colonialism that happens after the industrial era. Okay, so we're going to kind of be talking about two different things, and we're bringing this up at this point because this is when it falls in European history, but also wanting to kind of set the stage for our other units that we're going to do this year. After we get through our European history unit, we're going to be talking about different places in the world, different cultures in the world, and in every single one of those units, we'll get to a point where we'll say, and then, you know, they're kind of independent, and then the Europeans show up and colonize them. And usually the treatment of these people is very harsh, and that's going to have an effect on how those countries, you know, have a relationship with Europe, how their relationships in the modern world. So it's really a very important time period to understanding even just what you see on the news each night. Okay, so let's start off by talking about that first wave of colonialism, right? The first part you've actually talked about before, like in U.S. History 1. Okay, so the age of exploration you talked about in U.S. 1, and you also talked about, we mentioned it as part of the Renaissance. So remember that the Renaissance, Europe's rebirth, is all about knowing things, facts, right? Exploring the world. What can man accomplish and do? Okay, and so traveling, being able to, you know, map, travel, find these resources is a part of that. Okay, so there's all this quest for science and knowledge, and there's also the opportunity, a lot of opportunity for people. Okay, so you have individuals like Christopher Columbus, right, who want to explore, and then they approach these kings and queens of Spain and Portugal, and the kings and queens finance them. They buy ships and they finance these journeys. Okay, so, you know, this picture down here is a depiction of the first Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving's coming up, and it's a celebration of when the native people, right, and the settlers came together and they broke bread, right? Together they had this meal, and the native people really kind of saved the bacon of the settlers who were, right, about to die of starvation, and it's a celebration of that survival in the New World. Okay, so you're familiar with these stories, right? In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. All right, so this is part of our early education. Okay, so if you look at this map up here, this is a map of the world. The world. Not the best. It was done during the Middle Ages, 1190. This is the map Christopher Columbus was using. Much better, but still not super accurate. Many of your mental maps will look way better than this. This is one from the 1600s. And I'm showing you this progression so you can see how knowledge has been obtained, right? How this is getting more and more realistic. They're obviously doing more exploration. They have a better idea of what the world really looks like. All right, and then this map is one from the 1800s, 1866. This map was mass-produced and hung in every classroom in Great Britain. It's a map of the world. Great Britain is there at the center of the map, right? right at the center in red, and all of their colonies are in red. And the decorations along the side, this is like the great symbol of Great Britain here, and she is sitting on top of the world, and all of these people are bringing her, right, things, right, from the colonies. So when we're talking about colonialism, we are talking about one country, state, country, going into another and controlling it or manipulating it for their own purpose or gain. This control can be political, it can be economic, it can be social. So economic control would be, wow, you guys have chocolate, cocoa trees, and all this cocoa production, and we want to control the chocolate production, and we want to make money off of it and have unlimited access to cocoa. It could be that we want to take these materials, raw materials, like ore, coal, rubber, and turn them into things for our own uses. Okay, so that's economic. Political is okay, we're going to come here and you're no longer independent. We're going to tell you how you have to function. We're going to tell you that you have to be an allegiance with us. You have to supply us troops if we fight, that type of thing. And then there's cultural. You can't speak your language anymore. You need to speak English or French or whatever. You can't dress in your traditional ways. You should be dressing like Europeans dress. You should be Christian and not have your religion. Okay, so they put this on these people. That is colonialism, generally. So in the Renaissance, their original goal is to find sea routes to Africa and Asia. If you remember, Christopher Columbus was setting out to find Asia and happened upon the New World and thought, I found it. Mission accomplished. I'm in Asia. Wait a minute, this isn't right. Right, I'm not in the right spot. Okay, so originally they want those sea routes because Asia has all of these goods, these luxury goods. Silk, spices, tea, gold and silver, right? They're going to get rich off of all the things that they are able to trade from Africa and Asia. They also just want to, again, expand their knowledge. Once they actually encounter people, right, they discover these lands that they didn't know existed or is much bigger than they knew or has more resources than they knew. Once they start encountering these lands and these people and these resources, then their goals start evolving here. So we've got the religious goals, which I talked about, that they thought was their duty to convert people. If you remember, the Spanish and the Portuguese, or the Spanish conquistadors, when they came to the New World, they had in mind the 3 G's. Does anyone remember? Gold, glory, God. Yeah, gold, glory, and God. Nice job. Okay, so they have these 3 G's in mind, God being a big part of that. They also have, this is kind of maybe a little bit of a new thing to think about, they have a little bit of an issue in Europe with the fact that the Renaissance has helped people live longer. I mean, this is a good thing that lifespan is beyond 30 years. However, this also means you have a lot more adults that need work and a livelihood and homes. Okay, so if you can take some of these excess children that are surviving now and just ship them off and be settlers in some colony, then you're not dealing with them at home unemployed in your small island nation. Right? So this gives kind of a purpose for kind of excess population. And then this becomes there's a lot of greed involved here and a lot of competition between the other European countries. If one European country goes into Asia and starts dealing tea, right, and all of a sudden they're getting all this tea and they can sell tea in Europe for the best price, they've cornered the market, that's not good. Tea's more expensive, now they're making more money than you, right? This capitalism creates a lot of competition, which makes them want to compete with one another for these resources. So I want to show you this map. This is a map of all of the countries of the world that have been under European control at some point. anything in orange has never been under European control. So basically everything, all right? So all of these places were colonies. Basically the entire world were colonies of the Europeans. That's how widespread this becomes. And then some of these places obviously get their independence, like the United States, fairly early, and the U.S. goes on to be a colonizer. So this colonization is kind of a theme, and it's how big countries were operating during this time. So what started off as discovery turns into more conquest, right? Conquering people and taking their land or their products, whatever. So this is globalization, and there's a lot of really great things about being global, right? I love coffee, I love chocolate and spices and all of these things, and having access to them is wonderful, right? So there's great things with exchange of ideas and that type of stuff. But also, it came with this real dark side, which I'm going to be talking more about as we go forward, and which you'll hear about this year. So it really came with a dark side. So here, when Spain and Portugal in that first wave, they were both coming to the New World, and they ran into conflict, what they decided to do was just split the world in half. And they're like, oh, okay, Spain, you can have all of this, and we'll have all of this. Never mind that there's millions of people living in these places already. This really gives you the idea of their mentality. So by the 1700s, 1763-ish, just more have an idea, by the mid-1700s, Britain is going to take over from Spain and Portugal and be the most powerful European nation in the world and just the superpower of the world. They're going to have the biggest colony, the most influence, the most money, even though they are from this small island. All right, so I want to show you this book and see if you can pick up on some themes here, and I'm going to ask you what you notice. So this is an ABC book, right? You guys have read ABC books before in your past, or maybe the siblings, you've seen them, right? So this is an ABC book that was very popular, 1899. It's for little children. It's for little patriot children. All right, so A is for Army, that dies for the Queen. It's very best army that was ever seen. Fun for kids, right? B is for battles, by which England's name has forever been covered with glory and fame. C is for colonies. Rightly we boast that all of Great Britain has the most, like we have the most colonies. D is for daring, we show on the field, which makes every enemy vanish or yield. E is our empire, where the sun never sets. The larger we make it, the bigger it gets. I is for India, our land to the east, where everyone goes to shoot tigers and feast. And there's a guy, do you see the guy sitting on top of the elephant? Like on a platform? And he's got a little tray with like a bottle of wine on the top. Can you see that? Yes? Yes, can you see it? Okay. K is for kings, once warlike and haughty. Great Britain subdued them because they'd been naughty. So they're saying, hey, we subdued these foreign leaders and stuff, but it's okay. It's good that we did that. They were naughty. They're bad. N is the Navy we keep at Spithead. It's a sight that makes foreigners wish they were dead. O is the ocean, where none but a fool would dare question our title to rule. And we'll jump to Z. Z is the zeal which everywhere seen when a family practices God save the Queen. All right, I want you to talk to the person next to you, and I'm going to give you like 45 seconds. What is the message that's being given here? Some of the messages that you notice in this kid's book. Go. 15 seconds. All right, that's time. Thank you. Tell me some things. What did you notice right off the bat? This wasn't texty time. I think I heard lots of discussion. So tell me, what did you notice? Themes here. Help me out. Thank you. Britain is the best. Overall message. Yes, right up here. You can have it.
Oh, no, you got it.
Same thing. Britain's the best. Foreigners are bad. They kind of are deserving it. Yep. Queen is most important. War is okay. And let's be proud of it. Nice. Anything else you notice? All right. Views of these foreign people that they're bad, right? They're less than, and we are doing them a favor. Okay, so Britain has the same thing. Surplus population, a lot of nationalism. This word zeal, zeal means what? It's like enthusiasm, but extreme enthusiasm, right? So they're extremely enthusiastic about Great Britain. You see this in the book, right? That we're the best, we're the most amazing. All of these expeditions that they're doing opens up these resources and these new markets because of industrialization. So this is what Mr. Kaz was talking about. So initially this exploration is, hey, let's find some of this foreign stuff, exchange ideas, right? And then they start getting into it, they industrialize, and they think, oh no, let's make like a lot of money off of this, right? And we could be getting rich. And now that we have the power through all of our inventions, we can do this very quickly and efficiently. This is fueled by joint stock companies that Mr. Kaz brought up. This isn't like the nation of England going to these places and saying, we're going to dominate you, right? It is a lot of times companies by themselves showing up in these places and saying, we want to harvest all this stuff. And then the local people would say, yeah, you're not going to like cut down all our trees or take all our fruit. And then they would fight them, right? And then Britain would often, the nation would often back them up. And then you've got this real race for influence. They're aided by invention. He brought up some of their exploding shells, a machine gun, steam power, having trains, this kind of stuff is going to help them move supplies quickly, move armies quickly. They're going to be able to actually navigate really well. And so that's going to also allow for them to navigate. And they're also fueled by this idea that you guys brought up, that they think they're the best and that white people are better than people of these other places. And that it's their burden. That it's the white man's burden to help them. And by helping them, I mean take them over, take all their resources, make all the people work for you, right? And then kill them if they don't go along with it. Okay, so this is key here because the interaction, just stay still. Stay still. I have one slide left in 1 minute. All these interactions with Native people will set the stage for all of world history. Okay, so you've got this is the moment in time that when we look at modern issues, because Europeans came in and did what they did, they set a lot of these countries on a path for a lot of different issues. And I want to just show you these. In Australia, Britain decided to make Australia basically a prison colony. Just dump undesirable people in Australia because it's empty, but there's Aboriginal people. Enslavement, here are concentration camps. When England in the 30s confronted Germany and said, why do you have concentration camps? Germany said, you had concentration camps in the 1800s, which is true. This is a guy in New Zealand who liked to take the heads of the Maori people that he cut off and put them on display. Right? Some of these things that happened were very dark and are definitely going to have a huge influence on the world. Thank you. You can exit out the library doors.